I guess we're live.
That's it.
That was the instruction. So, hey guys, so thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to join me with this chat. This is a great opportunity for me, selfishly, to hear from you guys and go over these topics. So thank you for joining. So just the introductions first before we get into the context of the conversation. We have Vikul Gupta, the CTO for Qualitest Group. I work very closely with Vikul. Qualitest is the largest AI quality organization in the world, and that's largely thanks to Vikul and his team and all the great solutions and tools that he built. Vikul, do you want to give a few words about yourself?
Yep. So I work very closely with Kenny. I'm the CTO for North America Qualitest, responsible for mostly everything technology. And when we say technology, it's everything has AI component into it, whether it is how we test SAP or whether it is how we do performance testing on web-based applications and so on. Kenny?
Thanks. And then we're also fortunate enough to have the Tricentis CTO, Damien, on the call with us today as well. And I also work very closely with Damien and the Tricentis team. We were just exchanging that I need to pick up and catch up with him on a conversation topic. And Tricentis are the world-leading automation platform, particularly when it comes to SAP and the S/4HANA migrations. And they have a bunch of solutions that really help us with those programs. Damien, any words from yourself? Anything to add?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kenny, and great to be here. Just before I joined Tricentis, actually, I used to be the global chief architect for the RISE program. So that's why everything we're going to talk about is really all the problems that I saw in those days and how we're now helping our customers really with those transformation journeys using everything that we're just going to discuss today. Appreciate it.
I left myself till last, but I'm Kenny Small, so I oversee all of the enterprise engagements here at Qualitest, which the majority of my weeks and days are spent working on those S4 RISE transformations. And together with Tricentis, myself, Vikul, Damien, we work on some of the transformations for the largest global brands in the world, but also some smaller organizations. And the one consistency we see are the top 3 challenges. And that's what we want to talk about today and really pick your brains on the solutions, your opinions on those challenges. And those challenges would be data. Data is always the number one that comes up in all the conversations that we have. System availability is another one, especially when you're thinking of S4 RISE programs. It's not just S4, there's 80 to 100, sometimes even more at these larger brands of applications in that landscape that need to be considered for that end-to-end perspective. And then you've got bandwidth. And as we go towards the S4 deadline, more and more we're seeing teams get stressed and having to rely on the technology and solutions that you are both responsible for to help enable these programs to be successful. So I'll start with data just to begin the conversation. That's probably the number one challenge that I observe in my programs and that we all talk about and build solutions for. When it comes to data, there's a couple of categories. The first question and topic I want to go around is data. I spoke about those 80 to 100 of applications. We need to make sure data is existing in those applications. A lot of the times we have what we define as preventable defects we find late on, where the script will fail, the automation test will fail, what have you. Reason being, didn't have data in the target system or a particular application. Very common challenge. So I just want to hear about your opinions. I'll start with yourself, Damien. Where do you think people fall short when it comes to their data strategy, and how have you tried to address this from a holistic perspective?
Yeah, great question, Kenny. And I usually look at this from the point of view, it's a classic case of most of the time people think about things like this too late. They just think, you know what, I need to transform, I need to start configuring. And sometimes security, performance, and data gets pushed off to that last stage, right? Just like I used to talk about in the old days of transformations, I used to instill on people, you need to talk about archiving. And everybody used to look at me and say, I don't need to talk about archiving. You haven't even gone live yet, right? The problem is if you don't think about it and plan for it up front, as you said, Kenny, right? It tends to fall by on the wayside, and then you're playing catch up. So I think the key thing to remember is establish a strategy, whatever it may be, from data quality, data transformations, data for testing purposes. Anonymizing of test data. Make sure you have a plan for that. Or are you going to use synthetic data? So my biggest advice is, as you just said, don't leave it till the end. Start establishing and creating a strategy around it so that you at least get to know what's missing so you can address it. That's the problem sometimes. I think people don't address it. They don't know what's missing. And then they're playing catch up constantly trying to fight other fires whilst trying to get to a data strategy and an aspect. And I think people can kind of like talk to the fact of what does that mean to just think about it, at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely, right. I do agree, right. People think about it too late, so we have to shift left. We have to catch issues before they become bigger issues and delay your release timelines. I also feel that when we talk about S/4HANA transformation, there's a lot of interconnected systems which are in play. Now, if that is the case, we need to make sure that the data models are designed are not designed in isolation from integration architecture. Your retention policies need to be updated to reflect the new business process or legal requirements across connected systems.
Yeah, consistency across the platforms.
Correct. And a lot of these transformations, they assume clean, structured data. But many times the data strategy does not account for the volume or complexity of historical data across all the interconnected systems. So I would say we need to validate it early, validate often. Check metadata at source, at a middleware, check formats, and employ strategies like data virtualization and so on, so that we don't have to wait till the end to test end-to-end.
Yeah, I think one thing you just mentioned, I think it's going to be a common theme as we move forward is, as you said, I actually take it one step more than do it more often. It's continuous. The days of what we're talking about used to be project-based, right? It was the upgrade, the implementation, the migration. But the reality of everything that's happening now is it's a continuous cycle, right? As you do all of these things, it's not do it once and forget it and come back to it 18 months later. This is a continual aspect about testing, performance, validation, whatever you want to talk about it. That is the prima facie of what we're seeing now is it's a continuous safeguarding of functions because more and more changes are hitting the enterprise now more than ever, right, Kenny? That's really one of the key aspects that we're seeing. Change is hitting the enterprise every week, every day now. So it's that continuous aspect of I think we need to kind of move from traditional into the new working model.
So you sparked a good point there. You both mentioned earlier, shift left, continuous. Those are some key words I took out. Now, and Vikul, on your example, I've seen when we use Tosca DI from your team, Damien, and Vikul, you deploy Naresh, your data architecture programs. I've seen where they say, hey, as long as the source system exists, I'll start checking the metadata today. I don't need to wait till the target system, which may be SAP S4, for example, is fully configured, and then do the end-to-end. However, when most programs where we get called in halfway through or midway, we ask the question, when are you validating data? And often it's, we start thinking about that in UAT. Sometimes it's like, and it's like, that's a little bit too late. So why do you guys think that early and continuous approach still isn't resonating yet? And we're still seeing today, it sounds simple, but today we still see on the majority of our programs, we worry about data when it comes to SIT, UAT, and worry about doing the end-to-end in one block. Why do you guys think that mentality exists?
I can tell you from my point of view, I've seen it. It's just one of those things. As you said, it's a mentality. It's what they did before, right? Everybody was used to doing it in a silo, testing one environment after another. The reality is, back in the day, your ERP system may have talked to 3 or 4 systems back in the day. As you said, Kenny, nowadays they're talking to hundreds, if not thousands, right? And the other thing I like to mention is like this example, I think most customers are probably going through this right now. Things like these tariff changes that are hitting. And I know because everybody wants to talk about it, but the reality is if you've got a feed coming in from an external system like Thomson Reuters, you've got to make sure that the pipeline is going across your, all your downstream and upstream systems, and you're getting the right commodity codes established, etc., which drive actual business functions and drive actual OPEX and operating budgets now, right? Because if you're just using the wrong numbers, the wrong codes, it could just go whack. Because guess what? You might have set up a single daily feed from Thomson Reuters, but Thomson Reuters right now might be changing everything on an hourly basis based on whatever conversations are going across the global trade organization. So it's things like that's why you highlight the necessity for doing that continuous data integrity and validation, as you mentioned. It's a continual process, and you've got to realize if you don't start early, you're going to run out of runway. That's what I tell everybody now. There's a reason for starting early, because if you leave it to the end, you're running out of runway. And that's one of my main concerns.
Yeah. So Kenny, why are they, if they know it is there, why are they not doing it? I think one of the key reasons behind is lack of clear ownership. Business thinks IT owns it, IT thinks business owns the data.
Yeah.
So defining of clear data ownership is going to be important. Breaking down the silos and defining key data quality KPIs and exit criteria early on is going to be critical. Another thing which I think we discussed in the first question is we need to start embedding data strategy from day one. Make sure data ownership and accountability is clear and defined. We talked about shift left, right? Adopting early data profiling and quality checks is going to be critical too. From a testing standpoint, like you talked about my data validation team, right? Having a data validation sandbox goes a long way. And the last part, I think Damien alluded to, that is integrating data validation as part of your pipeline. If you do all of that, then you will stop seeing defects late in the cycle. You'll start, if you're continuously validating at every step, you'll catch them early and avoid a lot of rework.
And so that's exactly it. I mean, everybody probably on this call knows that if you let errors flow through into a productive use case, the cost of fixing that could be 5x to 20x versus capturing it up front in your test and your UAT or your SIT environment, right? And that's one of the reasons for the whole shift left strategy, is to do that. It's not just a cost basis, it's a cost of doing business issues. Your customer sat goes down, both from your external customers and from your internal customers. So that's one of the key metrics I think that we're seeing nowadays, is the availability and the user acceptance from both internal customers and external customers are driving a lot of this shift left strategy and doing things first.
So that's a lot about strategy and mindset change. And you started your answer, I think, Damien, with it's just the way we've done it before. What I've learned, and I'm very fortunate to be able to work with you guys and your teams and see the things, stuff that's not even released when we get to move out of the narrow AI into agentic AI and things like that. But I think one of the changes is the technology is available now, and I don't think many people are aware, or as fortunate as I am to work with you guys and see this, that you don't need to work in this way, because we now have solutions that can take care of this for us. So yes, think about the strategy up front, but at the same time, we actually have the technology to enable that. To carry on that theme and get a little bit more technical and deeper from a strategy perspective, we also spoke about 80 to 100 to sometimes thousands of applications in scope. The other challenge is, yes, we need to get data into these target and source applications and variety, but sometimes those quality landscapes, environments don't exist. Sometimes there's only one environment that exists, and the business say there's no way we're allowing you to touch this as part of the transformation. So to get a little bit more technical, how do you address that challenge as well? Because it's all good saying, okay, I've got you guys in at the start to one of my programs, to strategies clear, robust, we've got the tool chain there ready to use. But then we come to, okay, but environment isn't available, we don't have one. Now what do we do?
Yeah, I think it's twofold on this one, Kenny, right? One is that most end-to-end processes now span about 10 different systems by default. And I'm being rather nice by saying 10. and the second one is a lot of these systems are now cloud or SaaS based scenarios, right? And guess what? Now you're like business operations is left handling the complexity of trying to coordinate different tenant availability. Like I need my Salesforce test tenant, I need my Workday test tenant, I need my S4 test tenant, I need my SuccessFactors test tenant, right? And it becomes completely unwieldy in terms of making sure that the test tenant versions are the same, they're available, the capacity is there, etc. And that's where we've seen a tremendous amount of our solution, it's called OSV, orchestrated server virtualization, services virtualization, allows the end-to-end testing team to still test that end-to-end process by virtualizing that call out to a Salesforce engine, a Workday engine, an S4 engine, to finish doing the whole, the order to cash process. Even though it goes across 10 different systems, they can do an end-to-end without only having to provision every single one. And that's really the key here, is like having the flexibility to leverage that service back end without it being there, and mimicking it really well by listening to traditional transactions and playing it back in a configured manner. So that's the technical aspect. How you would actually use it now, Vikul, is up to you. You can perhaps speak to making it available is one thing, but leveraging it correctly is another thing.
See, what I have also found out in many cases, it's not just that they don't have a system. There's a cost angle involved too, right? If you have to hit a third-party system, there's a cost involved, right? Every time you hit the endpoint, and people don't want to do that early in the cycle because that's a lot of cost. So I think there are three steps, right? Damien talked about the first one, which is virtualizing the service itself. Let's say if you are a web-based application, you're shipping something out, you have a call out to FedEx APIs. Rather than making a call out to an actual endpoint, you can virtualize that service. So that's one aspect. Second is, rather than focusing on service virtualization, you could also kind of assume that the API went through, and in the end, you wait for data. So data virtualization could also play an important part. Now, service virtualization and data virtualizations are two strategies. But then from a testing standpoint, what can we do so that this dependency on these virtualized systems or actual third-party systems is minimized? We can create a modular test design which has dependency isolation built in. What does that mean? You create structured test scenarios to isolate and bypass unavailable tests using test doubles or alternate data flows. So these three steps, service virtualization, data virtualization, and modular test design with dependency isolation would be the three key aspects which I would recommend from a services standpoint to take care of this particular gap.
And then, I was going to say, one thing when we mentioned it, we're also seeing, believe it or not, with this whole large language models, right, Kenny? Everybody's talking about it. ChatGPT's out there and OpenAI's, and you realize, it's only like a 1/10 of a cent per call. But when they realize, some people is during testing, there's thousands of these calls in a test cycle. And that's exactly where our server virtualization is being used now. We can mimic a ChatGPT or an LLM model call because it's fairly deterministic in the response, right, while you're testing. So we mimic that, again, to your point, Vikul, saving a significant amount of money because people forget about the cost aspects of these calls.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've seen you in those sessions, Vikul, and I think you're a good advocate for our customers because I want OpenAI API calls, Azure API, whatever it is, and then Vikul's always there like, where's that cost going to come from and where's it going to go? Because you got to think about it. We can do it, but when you start hitting 10,000 calls, someone's got to be concerned about that. And one of the drivers, it's a great segue. I'm going to pivot a little bit now because we're on the agentic AI and generative AI conversation, which is what everyone's raving about. One of the benefits with that is it helps address bandwidth, which is the other challenge, which is connected to all of this. A lot of people want it because they think, it will save me having to deploy 10 resources, 20 resources, I can just use the API call instead. And Vikul, I know you've built a very, very powerful platform. Damien, I will get onto the Copilot that you guys are building as well. I think they're very, very proud as well. So when people think of automation traditionally, if I pick automation, they think of test execution. I want to execute my test cases, save resources. But Vikul, what I've seen you do, which has blown my mind, by the way, congrats to you and the team. You've actually looked at it from a different perspective of, let me actually look at the entire life cycle. What can we use generative AI and agentic AI to do to actually fully automate a life cycle? Could you just take me through some of the non-traditional aspects that you've automated?
Absolutely. See, that goes to the core of what we believe is the shift from quality assurance to quality engineering. It's not about executing, finding defects. It's about engineering quality from the get-go. So if it's engineering quality from the get-go, we start as early as requirements. We automate the whole requirement validation. If we find the requirements to be not good or ambiguous or conflicting, automating the fixing of that requirement. We've also automated the creation of non-functional requirements from business requirements. The automation to me is much more than just execution, because now we are moving towards autonomous automation. We're automating the automation itself. That requirement which we validated, which we created, which we fixed, can now be used to auto-create test scenarios, test cases, feature files. And then the autonomous aspect is creating that Selenium script, the Playwright script, Cypress scripts, or integrating with tools like the ones Tricentis has to automatically create the automation script for, let's say, for SAP, right? So that to me is the extent of automation, at least from a normal flow perspective. What else can we do? We talked about test data. There is an aspect of self-service, which is automating the TDM aspect of it. That's the second aspect. The other things which we normally add to mature organization is test prioritization and test optimization. If I elevate this beyond testing, then I start thinking about release automation. What can we do there, right? The whole continuous delivery and continuous deployment aspects. So this is my view from a services standpoint. Damien, I would love to hear your view from a product standpoint.
So as you said, I think everybody on here that's primarily involved with SAP, and I'd say SAP S/4HANA ECC world, right? ERP. We have been chasing this holy grail of CI/CD in the SAP world, right? As you said, to be able to get to autonomous release management in SAP is like the holy grail, right? That's where everybody wants to go. It's just because of the complexities and some of the necessities of the technology itself. But you're absolutely right. We are now seeing, and I've seen some questions regarding how can we help accelerate? How can I do more with less? I've got a question there about a person that's saying the QA team is going to be, pushed to condense, because the world of doing things manually is what's going out the window. And in our field, this is really predominant. I know everybody talks about AI taking your job, etc. But manual testing, yes, it's coming for you, right? If you're thinking about doing this manually. And I think also to your point, Vikul, we're also working with how we take a requirements document, a natural, a Word document that says, I need to make sure that SAP's order entry process is configured for credit checking, right? That's the only verbiage you need. We can, from that, deduce, as you said, a test case. And from that test case, we now automate the generation of running it. So as you said, we got the ability to automate the the requirements into a test case, and then we take that test case and we automate the actual testing. And I like the idea of autonomous automation, right? It's kind of sounds like an oxymoron, autonomous automation. But the fact is, traditional automation is test automation is defining it, it runs through the scripts, right? This is we are now on the cusp, I would say, with the way that our system works, with your systems, etc., where we're having this more of this agentic scenarios where you can say, here's a requirement, generate the test case, and then wherever you need it, oh, I got a test case, whether it's from our Q-test platform or from yours, I can ask our execution engine, run it. And by the way, here's the data that's being generated in a synthetic fashion, or whether it's from our data-driven testing strategy that we already use. So I think the new wave that we're seeing is how we're looking at all of these agents, kind of like, and I hate to be hype sensitive with these words, but we're looking at it from a quality agent, like a requirements on all of that, a release manager, and then the test automation as well. These are the kind of like it truly is becoming this a substitute for personas that exists currently in a QA field.
I like the way you brought in agents and agentic AI, right? Like, just to elaborate, right? Like, we have a lot of these agents. One of the agent is test coverage and analyzer. Are you doing optimal testing, under testing, over testing? So a lot of times we do this, we implement this agent and they get a coverage analysis and the customer turns to us saying, so what? And now we're saying, okay, we found that this particular area doesn't have any test cases, but we have requirements. We know how to validate requirements and create test cases and automation scripts. Let's automatically create the scripts so that the coverage is 100%. I talked about requirements, right? How we validate requirements, but we can also fix. Again, one more agentic capability. Another one which we are seeing, and this is important because anytime I go and talk to a C-level, they'll talk about how much automation do they have. 80%, 60%, everyone wants to boast about it. But the moment you ask for a different metrics, which is more about automation leverage, the number goes down to 20%, 30%, 40%. And the more you dig deep is, yes, we automated, but it's very costly to maintain automation. So
it's automated
now
it's automated for the first run.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're working on capabilities where we can self-heal.
Yeah.
So if the application is there, automatically traversing the application, identifying objects, looking at our test scripts, the page objects, and then healing them automatically. The beauty of that is, right, again, this is agentic in nature. You found a problem, you fixed it, and then you run the scan again to see, right, like where you are. So the beauty of this is not only will your automation coverage be high, but your automation leverage will also be high.
Yeah, and for Kenny, just one thing to say, and Vikul mentioned it. One of the things that we're seeing now with tremendous pickup is not about automating, it's not about testing. It's now making sure that you're testing the right thing. It's, as you said, it's a test coverage. It's a risk-based analysis. Even if you've got a fully automated testing environment, the rate of change that's hitting, as we just described, is so much. Even in an automated fashion, you can't run every single test every single time. So we got to this scenario where both companies were seeing the fact that all of this automation is great, but we're going further left and saying, okay, let's identify what needs to be tested based on the business change that's hitting your environment, especially on the S4, SAP world. We've got that capability. You've got capabilities for that as well. So you can do a risk-based testing strategy, and that gets automated. That's really the best way of looking at this. And you're only left with this kind of like one-off, by exception, manual validation, etc. And then guess what? Once you've manually gone through it, it gets plumped into the automated scenario for the next time that it comes up. So I think that's where most of the questions come in terms of like automation. Yes, out of the box, from green screen, mainframe, to cloud, to SAP GUI, to whatever you want to call it, fully automated. We're also working with SAP from Tricentis' point of view of providing data itself now as well, because SAP themselves will be leveraging Tricentis to do their engineering test cases, testing of the S4 engines coming out from now on. So, again, it's tools, processes from the likes of yourself, Vikul, and team Kenny, as well as other tools, and then our technology and tools and data and processes as best practices. I think that's what's going to be differentiated in the new operational model for quality assurance.
So I've got a bonus question for you guys, because this is and I can see you guys get excited about this topic as well, this autonomous automation and this vision to have all of this working together. We've all been on calls. I'll just share with the wider audience some of the conversations we've had. There's two of the largest S4 programs in the world ongoing today. One of them is in the energy sector, and when they showed us the program plan, talk about continuous change, they had swim lane under swim lane under swim lane under swim lane simultaneously happening. The other one, which is probably the largest brand in the world, they gave us that statement, and there's only been 2 times I've almost fell off my chair, so to speak, and they said, I want a change to go from the development, the ABAP development, all the way through to production in under 24 hours. I said, big ask, but we're space testing maybe. And then they said, and 0 human touch. I don't want a human to touch it. And I was like, this is to do one change is fine, but you're one of the biggest brands in the world. You have probably 100 changes a day, and significant ones. So the only way to address and deal with that is this autonomous automation journey that I'm collaborating with you guys on, because I bring you guys these challenges. I fell off my chair and just said, oh, well, I'll just call you guys and just figure it out. How close are we to achieving that vision? Because I gave 2 examples of the largest programs in the world, but every week I have another customer come to me and say, can you help me achieve this? So how close do you guys think we are to being there so we can press a button and it all works?
See, from a Qualitest perspective, we see this as a better together initiative. How can we in Qualitest and Tricentis work together? You talked about how we leverage their platform, right? And we have capabilities on our own side. One of the things which you mentioned was change is happening and getting to prod within 24 hours. Now, one of the key aspects there is change impact based testing. We call it CIBT, change impact based testing. Now, when we have released something that fast, we have to apply test optimization strategies, and I'm calling it strategy. There are multiple levers in that strategy. One of them, Damien just talked about, which is risk-based testing. The second one is change impact-based testing. If a particular transport is only getting impacted, then why do you need to run all the test cases? Is there a faster way to identify the test cases which are impacted and run those only? So Tricentis has their tools. We have our capability called CIBT. Technology doesn't matter. The concept is what is critical. So second lever is change impact-based testing. The third lever is running those test cases which have a higher tendency or a higher defect yield early in the life cycle, so that if they fail, you're able to fix. Maybe it's an environment issue, it's a configuration issue. If they fail early in the cycle, at the 8th hour rather than the 23rd hour, so that you can still fix it and run it at the time. So these are the 3 which come to my mind. And back to your question about autonomous automation, how close are we? Kenny, you are demoing some of those platform capabilities, and we are seeing some of the case studies. So it is very much real. What is key for this being real now than before is the introduction of GenAI. And what GenAI has done is it has democratized a very important technology and put it in the hands of users like us. And what are we doing? We're taking that technology thing and we're obfuscating the complexity of GenAI. We don't want our testers to worry about prompt engineering, whether I'm using GPT-4, whether I'm using Azure, whether I'm using Bedrock, whether I'm using Claude. Doesn't matter. We're obfuscating the complexity of it and getting them so that they can push a button and take the journey from user stories, to test scenarios, to test cases, to feature file, to automation scripts in Tricentis. And if something fails, again use GenAI to do root cause analysis. So I personally believe the time is now. It is happening now. Customers are wanting it, because without this, meeting all the timelines, especially for SAP, is going to be impossible. Damien, what's your
I totally agree with that. I mean, we've started creating and prototyping something, Kenny. We call it the an agentic framework for release management. As you said, release. We actually are talking about release management at the end of the day. All of this stuff comes down to, right? And the goal is to get that hourly release level for things like SAP. So definitely seeing the work that we're going with from the agentic and the agent frameworks, as well as the Copilot stuff. But one thing I will add to this is you can't have everything that we're talking about with this this kind of framework. This applies for other areas in business as well as testing and automation stuff. It's transparency. As Vikul mentioned, as more and more of these Gen AI capabilities and language models are used to do things, in a non-deterministic way, what you're going to have still is the human in the loop kind of operations. But if you stick a human in the loop, they need to know what the hell what's going on, right? So the transparency and auditability is going to be key. And I think what we're going to start seeing is a lot of the stuff that we saw in the validated systems kind of world, which was you need to show me exactly what you did because I got to show the auditors, right, when they come knocking on the door. That same level of rigor and control, I think it's going to be standard, and it's going to be kind of like not there consistently, but it's going to be available to mine and fix any issues that come up. So we can actually go back and see that. And I think that's where it's going to be, is we're going to have not only these agents doing this, but we're going to have a validation or auditing agent functions as well to show this is what happened and this is what occurred, so that we have the traceability and the transparency. Because everybody wants to talk about Gen AI, but it's that visibility that sometimes gets lost that we need to make sure we have within the frameworks that we develop.
I've never thought of it from that angle, so that's I'm going to be saying that on my calls later today and later this week.
It's $5 later on, right?
Yeah, I'll give you the credit. Don't worry, I'll give you the credit. I never like to pretend I know what I'm talking about. So I do have follow-up questions, but Shilpi, who's our lead and all the organization for this, is gonna kill me if I don't answer some of the questions that are coming through. So there are a bunch of questions in this group. Let me quickly go through and pick one. So there's a question here from Until, I believe. Says, my QA budget is being impacted this year. How can I accelerate within my means? So I think that's going to infer and translate a little bit here. I think that's saying all of this solution sounds great. I hear this all the time as well. It sounds great, but if you're going to tell me it's $X, not something I can achieve. So how can you do this with a cost-effective mindset?
I think that the last topic we talked about, which was about how do you do autonomous automation? How do you speed up things? How do you do more with less? Probably would be very apt here. So there are various means. I'm not going to say buy this, buy that. You can build it on your own if you have the means to do it. Otherwise, there are plenty of platforms. Tricentis has one, Qualitest has one. And the whole thing is about not just doing testing, but doing smart testing. Not just doing assurance, but doing quality engineering. If you do that, if you're able to prevent defects rather than find defects, you'll be able to show value with the same amount of budget. If you needed 17 people before, and a lot of them were manual testers, like Damien was saying, a lot of that manual testing goes away with the adoption of Gen AI and AI-based solutions. So we have seen, and can you keep me honest, right? Like, especially in some of the SAP testing world engagements, the work of 17 people could be done by 7 or even less. What would take more than 6 months can be done in 6 weeks now. So again, back to the whole idea about shift left, right? Like using AI to automate the automation could be a easy way. Automation maintenance, increasing automation leverage is a big effort reduction. Test optimization, if you don't have to run 8,000 test cases and only run 80, that's a big effort saving, cost saving, right? And then a lot of one of the things I see is what AI does is digitizes the tribal knowledge you guys have and puts it in the system. Now, what you needed a senior architect to do can be done by a slightly junior architect. So that's a cost saving. So that's my view, Kenny, from a services platform standpoint. Damien?
No, I was going to say the other thing is, as you mentioned, it's all about testing more wisely, let's call it, right? And the other part about this is, as the whole thing is now transitioning to the cloud-based consumption model, so the overhead that traditional on-prem scenarios had, it starts to reduce. So your cost should see a downward pressure on that. So it's things like that. All of those things. I would strongly advise you to still hold on to your team. It's just, and show the fact that it's not a question about impacting in terms of budgets, but impacting in terms of what we can actually do with the same budget. That's the one way I would go about looking at it from as well. Restating, we're going to get rid of the manual testing. We can actually end up doing more by this investment. That's the way I would attack that from that question there.
So I think it's identify the savings that we can achieve and put that into your budget number and have the conversation based on the opportunity and value that we'll achieve, not just the budget number itself.
Exactly.
And we've got some ROI calculators we can help with. I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 more questions. We might only have time for one. We will answer all of these questions directly and reach out to you guys. So thanks for the questions. This one is quite relevant. I was actually just in the Bay Area. I just landed back, and it's almost the exact same concern. The question is, I don't know, can I get it on screen? I don't know, Shilpi, if you can bring it on screen, but it's from PM. It says, we are on a SAP cloud. Our biggest concern is regression testing for each release. It's causing a lot of drain on resource hours. Can our solutions help with this? And this, we didn't mention this in the challenges, but this touches on the bandwidth issue. This is a conversation I have day after day after day. The change is continuous, kind of what we spoke about. Change is continuous. I've only got 3 people who manage this application. They're on holiday. I need to validate it. What can we do? So how do you guys recommend that we can help out and our solutions approach regression testing, which is continuous?
Yeah, and from our point of view, obviously with Tricentis, the answer is firm yes and more, because this is exactly where we're seeing leveraging the test data platforms that even like Qualitest brings to us as well, and being able to leverage our data. This one is very key to both a data-driven test management and an autonomous, right? It's got to be both, right? Because it's got to have a data-driven nature to it, because that's how you want to make sure that you pass through the regression test, right? You have to make sure that every single business process that you're currently running carries on running. And again, the second part about it is, I don't need to test that unless I've already identified, oh, these are the 15 changes to the sales order processing. These are the objects and lines of code that come in from our risk-based test analysis. So that we reduce it that way, and we now automate the data-driven nature. So that's exactly how we're seeing customers really helping with this. And the last thing I'll mention, PM, is the fact that with SAP's move to cloud, and with S/4HANA private cloud, they're saying 6 monthly functional pack stacks and 6 monthly service pack stacks. So even as an ERP system now from SAP, you've got to change possibly hitting once a quarter. And if it takes you 45 days to test for regression, you're going to fall behind. So this is exactly the reason why the platform and services capabilities that we're talking about is really front and center.
Kenny, I'll bucket it into 3 pillars: smarter, faster, safer. Smarter, so they have a lot, they're spending a lot of time in regression. Why? So you can be smart about it and employ test optimization strategies like we talked about, change impact-based testing. Identify what test cases are impacted for this release and run those. Identify high-risk items and run those. Identify those test cases which have a tendency to fail and run those. Smarter. Faster is about autonomous automation. Now you've identified 80 test cases to run. Are they automated? No. Some of them are automated. Some of them are outdated. Okay. Self-healing AI for autonomous automation will make it faster, safer. You could come up with an optimization strategies that I'll only run these high-risk test cases. But do you feel confident that you're not letting a bug go through? How do you ensure that? By using capabilities like test coverage analyzer, right? Making sure that all your requirements, all your code is covered from a testing standpoint. So you don't release faster, test faster by compromising quality. So the smarter, safer, faster would be my answer to address this drain on resources for regression testing.
I couldn't agree more, and that's the conversations that we're having. Smarter, faster, safer. I think that is a very accurate summary of how we should all view the world and split it into those three buckets and address those challenges. Yes, holistically, but let's be focused, individually focus on these buckets and have an answer for each of those buckets. 100%. We're out of time, unfortunately. As I say, I'm fortunate enough that I can ping you guys and bother you guys whenever I need for these challenges. But I would recommend for the audience, reach out to us, whether it's on LinkedIn or through our organizations, our emails. Shilpi's brought up where you can meet us. If you're going to Sapphire, we'll all be there. We're going to do a bunch of sessions and speeches, and we've got a good few demos as well. So a lot of this stuff that we're speaking about, you can actually touch it, feel it, see it live in action. They do really work. So meet us at Orlando if you're going to be there for Sapphire. If not, reach out to us. All of these questions I can see in the chat, we will respond and give an answer individually. But unfortunately, we do have to end the call. But
yeah, great. Yeah, likewise. Please look me up at Sapphire. Be around. Just send me a LinkedIn message. I'm happy to meet up. Anybody that's going to be there. Awesome. Okay.
Well, thank you guys so much. Vikul, Damien, always great. Thank you for the insights. And we should do this again and maybe dive 10 levels deeper into the AI conversation, because there's a lot of noise there and a lot of misdirection. So we can course correct.
Totally true. All right, great. Thanks, Kenny.
Thanks, team.
Thanks, Vikul. Cheers.
Have a good day.